Howdy, folks. We have got a lot to get to today, so I'm going to jump right into it. So this will be a Q&A session, but to start, I wanted to get the winners of the spoiler contest. So unfortunately, no one was able to guess it correctly. It was Genesis. Haha, surprise, which, to be fair, that's kind of a tough one to guess, right? He's only had one card before this, and I think it was Opus 3 is his only other card, so most people probably weren't thinking, oh, well, maybe he's going to make a comeback. But that's okay. For the next one, I really do want someone to be able to guess it, so I'll probably give an even bigger clue and try to give something that can really narrow it down. But nonetheless, so since nobody got it, we are going to go ahead and spin this wheel to see who won it. So I've got there were 61 entrants on it, and so I've got my survey results here. And I've got all the guesses. So essentially, my mistake, I forgot to ask for people's names. So some of you didn't leave a name because I didn't ask for it. But, you know, people submitted their guesses in order. So I just put them in order. So 1 is the very first guess. 61 is the very final guess. So we're just going to spin the wheel. We'll spin it 3 times, and then I will distribute prizes out to those 3 people, basically starting with the first, and they'll get their choice. Again, we got a Visa gift card, $50, a full art of your choice that I'll be giving away, and some other cool stuff. So here we go, and let us see who is our first. What number wins first? Number 52, and that is, and the winner of that looks like Discord name Zach4409. He guessed Renoa category 8. Was not Renoa, of course, but hey, was a darn good guess nonetheless. And you, sir, have gotten yourself some prizes. So let's flip back here. We'll take him off the list. So everyone's got just that slightly better chance. Here goes spin number 2. Who is going to be our next lucky winner for our spoiler contest? Oh, it's one of the early entrants. Contestant number 10. Let's see, and that is going to be the Magic Man himself, Mike Byrne from Ready Check Radio, who guessed Regis from category 15. A good guess, especially since we've seen Ingus. I always get those two confused. They sound so close. Ignis is the guy from 3. Ignis and Noctis and Prompto. I don't know if we saw Gladiolus or not. But yeah, great guess there, but obviously wasn't right. But hey, congrats. You are our second winner. Okay, so we've got 1 left to go. So we'll remove them. And our third and final winner is going to be... Give the wheel a spin. Who might be one of our later contestants. One of the latest entries. Number 55, almost tipped over to 56 there, but 55. And that is going to be formerly unknown on the Discord. I believe his name is Matt. Matt, congratulations. His guess was the Ice Mateus FF12 summon from the Dawn of Heroes preview. Really good guess, to know that, hey, we know for sure this card's coming out. We just don't know if anyone's got it. Unfortunately, that ended up not being my card. It ended up being, I think, Jared Wallace's spoiler. So it was a community spoiler. So you had the right idea. It just wasn't mine. Nonetheless, you are a winner. Congratulations. I want to say thank you to everyone who participated. Really appreciate it. If I can get a new spoiler next time, I will do another contest. And again, I do want people to guess it. So I'll try to give a really good clue so that, you can zero in on it. But thank you to everyone who participated. I really appreciate it. And I will be in contact with the 3 of you shortly to work on your prizes. So yeah, if you're just here for the contest, feel free to leave. Otherwise, stick around for a Q&A session. All right, starting off with Q&A, our first question of the week comes from Rosie Rio, who asks, if you had to redesign the identity of wind, what direction would you take the element? So if I had to redesign it completely, and we'll just say, again, I can't really share any similarities, I would like to see something that's kind of like a swarm deck. In that, and Chocobos kind of had that, right? To a small degree. That the idea is you just put a bunch of bodies on the board, maybe they're not very strong, but there's just so many of them, they can just overwhelm you with a bunch of force. And again, I kind of liked that in Chocobos. It never really worked out that way. Magic the Gathering has decks that do that. There's like a soldier deck that just swarms you with all these little soldier tokens that, again, most of them are 1/1, maybe 2/2, but there's just so many of them. Or you have ways to like buff the field. They can just kind of run you down. Now, Final Fantasy, that'd be a little trickier to implement because in Magic, a creature can only block one time. So that's how you win with a swarm, right? It doesn't matter if you have a big 10/10 creature and I've got all 1/1s. If you've got one of him and I've got 10 of mine, you can still only block one of my guys and I'll just run you over with damage. But in Final Fantasy, you can block endlessly as long as that forward hasn't been broken yet. So I'm not sure mechanically what would have to happen to kind of change that or to make that work, but I think that's just a neat identity. And so again, if I had to redesign Wind from the ground up, I would like that idea, like the wind, it just whoosh, just kind of just tries to blow past you really, as quickly as it can, or just again with overwhelming numbers. So that is what I would do. The Custom Card Man asks, would y'all be willing to make decks with the boss cards and play a few matches? Maybe put the stipulation only like 10 to 15 cards max. So it sounds like you're saying have a normal Final Fantasy deck of 50 cards, but again, maybe 10 or 15 of them are boss cards instead. That could be interesting. I mean, surely it would be pretty strong, right? I do have a boss battle on this channel. If I remember, I'll link it in the description. Otherwise, you can search the channel for it, where we do a full-out boss battle. But again, it doesn't sound like quite like you're willing. That's what you're talking about? Yeah, I'm not opposed to the idea. I always like different ideas for content. So unfortunately, stuff like the boss battle, I think, becomes less and less relevant as not only new sets come out, but as a competitive season has returned. Like things like that, those little side decks and such really helped fill the gap when there wasn't competitions and such. I feel like the interest just isn't going to be there, but hey, I'm not opposed to the idea. Soranoka asks, backup hate is coming strong from what we have seen. What is your opinion on it? I mean, as someone who likes to get his backups down, of course, I hate it when my backups are messed with, that they're broken or they're bounced by Une, etc. Is it incredibly strong? Obviously, there are times it feels very punishing, and it's not the way you want to play the game, or at least that I want to play the game. That again, I like that idea that if I set up early, I'm rewarded later by everything I have to pay for is now cheaper because I have these backup resources, whereas if I have to just pay everything from hand. So I do think it's a necessary part of the game. Necessary more in the sense that, not that I think there's any particular backups that cause the game to not be playable, but more just, I'm always in favor of more design space. That, hey, instead of just attacking the creatures, the forwards you put out, what if you attack your resource generator, right? Your backups. At the same time, is it incredibly annoying? Yeah, it is. Would I personally be sad if it disappeared? I'll be honest, no, I wouldn't, because again, I like the idea of I get my backups set out and I get to use them. And the question always is like, is it worth it? So, when you play Une is very different, right? Because not only does she send a backup packing, she has continued value after that. The longer she stays around, the more summons she's going to recur. Same with Leviathan, Lord of Whirl. He can send a backup packing, and the longer he sticks around, the more chances he has to minus 9,000 to something. What about a summon like 3-cost Hecaton Kyre, right? Which just says break a 3-cost backup or more. So if that costs you 3 to cast it and you break this backup, and let's just say it's a backup that did its job. It's the Sarah Opus 13 4-cost Sarah backup. She came in, she searched out your princess, and now she's just there. Is that actually worth it for you to break that? There are times I wonder if it is that, maybe if you have nothing else better to do on that turn, but does that push you ahead? Because essentially you're sacrificing some of your own speed or tempo to slow your opponent down. And again, from that design perspective, I think that's interesting. Yeah, it's such a hard one because again, I don't like it because I don't enjoy being on the receiving end of it. But at the same time, I appreciate the design space it plays in. As long as they're just careful with it, I think cards like Une are kind of a problem because again, if Une's only purpose was to come in, disrupt a forward and a backup for the turn, okay, then, that's one thing. They paid 6 or 4 for that. But then the fact that she's this continued threat that, also you have to now answer this card, which is even harder to do because now you have less resources to do it with. So that is when it feels kind of punishing in a way that I don't personally find enjoyable. So I hope that was a satisfactory answer for you. Miguel Angel, I totally butchered that, didn't I? Miguel Angel, with an avocado next to him, asks, do you think it's viable to introduce a new type of card, terrain, airships, items, etc., or is it something that will change too much how the game is played? Miguel, I've been asking for that for a while. I would absolutely love that. Yes, it would change how the game is played, assuming it's impactful. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, we haven't had a new card type since Monsters in Opus 4. And even some of the new things they've added since then, like crystals or the warp mechanic. Crystals specifically, all the crystal stuff is still tied to the text on your cards. That, okay, but you have to put this forward in and then it gives you a crystal, or it lets you spend that crystal, or you put a backup in and it gets you that crystal, or spend it. I would love to see something more akin to enchantments in Magic, like Tribute to the World Tree. And the closest they've gotten with that is kind of the Opus 16 hero monsters, like Biblos. Biblos says, anytime you discard, you dull freeze something. Tros. Anytime a forward is bounced, you get to draw a card. And I like that. I like that it's this repeated effect. I would like to say, hey, anytime a forward enters, do such and such. Anytime a backup enters, do such and such. The problem in FF so far, at least, is that it's hard to make effects like that because currently they are tied to other effects, right? The backup is tied to another backup, which then means, okay, well, you've only got 5 backups. Or the forward is tied to another forward, so once that forward dies, then that effect isn't there anymore. Airships is such a great suggestion. I really like that. That's such an iconic part of Final Fantasy that, I don't know if you'd work it like crew and Magic or what you do, but what if you could? Your team could board your airship. You could give it like kind of a flying aspect in Final Fantasy, right? Like you can put a forward in an airship and they can fly over the attackers on the other sides. That way they can't reach them. That'd be neat. So I would love to see something like that. I think that would be really cool. The one and only Lance Pearson asks, can you see a meta shift with the current ban list, or do you think we'll see more of the same post-20 launch? A new set always brings in new things, so, that's kind of inevitable. I don't think... I had a big debate about this with a couple of my buddies about Mono Water in particular, right? Looking at Sildra. Mono Water's dead, you'll never see it again. I was like, I don't think so, man. I know Matisky said that, too. He put on a public post that he was like, if anything, I think it's better than ever because now it doesn't have to deal with Althea. Like, undoubtedly, Sildra hurts it, but I don't, now Water, has to go play a fair game where they have to do the Sarah backup? Okay, so now they still have a backup that searches a backup. They just can't get away with the 8 backups or the 6 backups anymore. But they still have Lena Leviathan, which is a one-sided board wipe for free, which is insanity. They've gotten great new cards in Opus 20. They still have some of the most diverse summons in the game, some of the best single unique use forwards in the game, like Porum and Tidus. The whole parade of monsters that there still isn't any hate to deal with, and from all the cards we've seen from 20, there's still nothing to deal with all these monsters, so that's still just an incredible threat that I have all these potential attackers that you can't actually do anything about until the moment they become live. Yeah, I mean, again, will it be as strong? No, of course not, but it will still be a great deck, as will Wind. Wind is so strong. Like, again, will it be weaker because of no Althea? 100%. But there is still no deck that comes close to touching a Wind deck in the late game, whatever that is nowadays. Look at some of these tournaments where Ice Wind, Sam Toole board wiped with a 7-cast Luso in the finals on turn 2. He didn't need Althea for that. Althea was nowhere in that equation. So, again, will these both be weaker? Sure, but I don't think it really changes their place in the meta at all. Sketchbook Keeper asks, how do you think they decide what to reprint? Parentheses, why are we getting another reprint of Neo X-Death when staple cards like Amaterasu are at least $40 on TCG Player? Everything I'm about to say, of course, will just be speculation because I have no idea. I have no idea what they decide to reprint. I know they like to reprint legend cards, and that they're just like, hey, here's legends. A lot of times they're legends that no one used. Sometimes they're great old legends that could still be relevant, like Opus 4 Lock, I think is a great example, or the Opus 12 Lock, still very, very good. I don't know. I don't know if they care about, that's technically talking about like the secondary market, right? And I would be surprised if they looked at that, hey, we need to reprint Amaterasu because it's an expensive card. I don't know if they even look at that. So honestly, unfortunately, I just don't have a satisfying answer for you. I just think they pick legends they like with good art. Neo X Death, that card might suck mechanically to play against, but I love that art. So I'm kind of actually excited it's got a full art reprint because I've always thought that art looked awesome. But yeah, unfortunately, I just don't know. My guess would just be legends and the art is mainly what they go based on. Mune, or is it Mune? Mune asks, do you think Stranger of Paradise will take off like 15, getting one card a set before more category cards in the following set, or be like Record Keeper, getting one card so far in the last 10 sets? That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't even played Strangers of Paradise. Nothing about that game looks appealing to me. It just looks very whack, to be honest. And especially with 16 just now coming out, you'd think they'd maybe focus more on that. I don't know, but they do like to focus on their modern games, especially ones that are on consoles. So if I had to guess, I would think that, yes, it's going to get a lot more category cards. Whereas like Record Keeper was a mobile game that isn't War of the Visions, so I guess it must not have made nearly as much money for them as Brave Exvius for them to put all those cards in there. So, but the Record Keeper was kind of unique, right? I mean, I didn't 100% play that game, so someone else can correct me if I'm wrong, but Tyro was a unique character to that game. But were there many other unique characters in that? Because the little I played, you just you visit past battles from old Final Fantasies with those Final Fantasy characters. So, it's not like Record Keeper had a bunch of new characters. So maybe that's just why Tyro is the one, because he's the only character in that game, where Strangers of Paradise has a whole cast of characters you can pick from. So if I had to put money on it, I would say it's going to get more cards. It will not be like Record Keeper. Katsumoto asks, what is the most underutilized mechanic, and why is it back attack? So, Katsumoto, I wanted to see if it truly was back attack, if we're talking about from a keyword perspective, because I thought First Strike might not be on a lot of stuff either. So I just put in First Strike into ability text on FF Decks, and I did one for back attack too. According to FF Decks, so this is showing 24 of 128. There are 128 cards with the word First Strike on it. Now, to be fair, not all of these are give something First Strike. As you can see, this Time Mage something, it says make a forward lose First Strike, but it does interact with that, right? I don't think there's anything that says make a card lose back attack, because how would you even do that? And then why is a Tomos on here? See, this is why sometimes I get sketchy about the searcher on this. Why did a Tomos show up here? It doesn't have the word, I guess because when he attacks, and it has the word backup, so he's on here. Okay, so this Fat Chocobo doesn't have back attack. I'm keyword back attack. Okay, here we go. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's always right at the top, right? 9. And let's see who's on the 10. Mid is on the next page. 11, Sephiroth. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so we have 17 cards that have the back attack text. So yes, you're right. It is obviously the least utilized mechanic. Keyword, why is that? Couldn't really tell you, to be honest. It's powerful, right? Or at least it should be very powerful, because normally a forward is restricted to a main phase 1 or 2, so being able to play it on your opponent's turn, essentially at any time, is incredibly strong. Or even during your combat phase, that mid-combat, you can trick in one of these cards just to do that. So I'm sure it's something they're purposely very careful with, just because it has such strong text. And at the same time, oddly enough, you don't really see a ton of these cards. Sephiroth has got to be the most played one, right? This Sephiroth. Snakeheart didn't really work out. Sonnen you do see a bit if you see Earth Lightning. Sonnen's and Gao shows up in the 6 stuff. So there are examples of it, which, is it the mechanic itself, or is it, again, tied to the text of the card? That old Opus 10 Sephiroth was good, but it just dulls something. So here, you want something that breaks. You essentially want some form of removal. to use it as a combat trick. But if I would guess why they underutilize it is they're just worried about, could you imagine back attacking in something super, super strong or insane like Leviathan or Chaos, 11 cost Chaos. Just, yeah, the stronger the card is, obviously, the more game-breaking it would be, too, if you could play it during your opponent's turn. So I just think, yeah, they just want to be very mindful of what they put it on. Firewolf / the Burger Man asks, what NPC from a mainline Final Fantasy would you like to see as a card, and what would the card be? All right, so we got a little FF Wikipedia up here. 10 was my first instinct because it's my favorite game, and I pulled up some of the non-player characters. Belgamine hasn't gotten a card. I've wanted to see Donna and Bartello. Yeah, he's a guardian down here for a long time. I think that'd be really cool. Isaru and his clan were really cool as well. Lord Grandorf, Lady Ginham. Some of these aren't as important. Unalesca does have a card. Maroda, yep, he's there with Isaru, and his name is Pache, or they call him Pache. And you have Seymour's mother, Emperor Zahn, you've got some of the Albed. Buddy did recently get one. And all the Blitzballers, the Besaid Aurochs, it's kind of surprising they don't have a card. So Donna and Bartello are the two I would think of. What would the card be? I have no idea. Preferably something that works together. Maybe in water. Water seems to really fit Spira's world. But there's characters from other games too. Like I said, 10 was the first one I thought of. Everyone knows that the Tantalus gang from 9 is definitely needs some cards, as does Dr. Tot. And in FF6 too, you could do some of the other Moogles, and you could do there's the wolf guy that Maw gets into a fight with, and you've got to save him from him. You could do some of the other Espers. Madowin, God, why he's such a prominent figure, at least for the Espers in that game. Why doesn't he have a card? And I saw something too, I think it was Colin Harris from Australia posted on Facebook too, that, every time they reprint some of these 7 cards with the same name, you've got that Aerith here. We've got the spoiler list here. There was an Aerith. Yeah. This card, why call it Aerith? Why not give it to a new character? Because the name clash alone already means, all right, well, I'm not going to play it in another deck where I'm playing Aeriths. Same with Yuffie cards. Give it to, there's so many characters that could use cards, even these throwaway, at least give them that. It fills out the title list, it gets them on the board, etc. So, oh well. Kurjan asks, what new card are you looking forward to most from those revealed thus far? Well, it's so funny, Kurjan, I was supposed to record this last night, but I'm recording it today, and right before I went to record this, the entire set got spoiled by IGN. So I was originally just going to, talk about maybe 60 cards or so, but now I've seen them all. Now, granted, I've only read them all once, so a lot of it's still I got to process. So from the new ones that were spoiled, it's got to be Setzer. It gives what I wanted was that they clearly set up this party attack with the new lock, and I was like, okay, but are they going to have something that lets you do it with any element? Sure enough, they gave it to us, and it is Setzer. And then they even added a reward on top of it, so that's freaking cool. As far as the old ones go before then, probably Orin. He's just kind of interesting. One, I've always liked that character. The art for it is fantastic too. And while I don't think there's anything in this set that truly is going to change the way we play the game, and I haven't felt that for a long time, he is at least interesting that you can essentially protect yourself from damage, and then he takes it instead, kind of fits that guardian role. So yeah, I'm curious to see how he's going to play out. So I would probably say Orin from the, again, before the big IGN release. Xavier asks, do you think FFTCG should allow a sideboard for Top Cut when it's best of 3, or a sideboard in any capacity? If so, up to how many cards would you allow? So if we were going to do it, I think it needs to be consistent throughout the day. It already kind of bugs me that non-Top Cut is Swiss rounds, right? Where we saw it on stream in Raleigh. You can see it on any of the streams where sometimes people just have awful luck. Their decks just don't give them the cards that they need to, and it's essentially a dead round. They essentially shouldn't even be playing that round because their deck just, it just didn't give them the cards they wanted to see, and then they couldn't even play. Whereas, in Top Cut, if it's best of 3, at least if you have one of those matches, okay, well, you've got another chance to make up for it. So if you're going to have it, you should always have it. I don't like the idea of Top Cut getting even more special favors. So if it were up to me, it should just be allowed all the way through. I actually, what I find interesting about your question, Xavier, too, is the whole up to how many would you allow, right? I think Magic allows 15. But what if FF allowed something really small? Like, what if we just start with 5? 5, maybe even 3. You are allowed 3 or 5 cards you're allowed to swap in. And for balance purposes, like in Magic, I'm pretty sure your opponents don't know what you swap in. But if for whatever reason people say balance-wise it needs to be in there, you could even make that public knowledge that you could say, hey, I'm going to swap out, these 3 Mist Dragons for these 3 Dark Emperors, or for this Sid Randall and Gentiana. Now, I think that probably should be private, because, again, I like the idea of you having to adapt to kind of an unexpected thing. You would see it in the sideboard, right? You would see it beforehand. But especially when it's 5, okay, they probably put Sid Randall in for this matchup. So I think that would be interesting to do. Miguel Angel, with another one, and I actually said his name correctly that time, asks, do you think the game needs more keywords? If Brave is mostly linked to Earth and Haste to Fire, what do you think some keywords, new and already existing, should be associated with other elements? Great question. Well, based on some of the spoilers we've seen from Opus 20 in the IGN reveal, they put a few more back attack cards in, and I think they were mostly ice. Again, I briefly looked over it, so I don't have this memorized or anything, but I know the new Calbrina, I think she's got back attack, and he's like a Mist Walker. What's that big face called? Wicked Mask. He's got back attack. So it seems like they kind of want to make back attack maybe Ice's thing, and a lot of previous cards have had back attack as well. I would, as far as new stuff, yes, first of all, yes, I'm absolutely in favor of more keywords. I've never understood the arguments against keywords. The only downside to a keyword is it makes getting into the game just a little trickier, that much more trickier, because it's one more thing to remember. However, in the long run, it makes it easier to remember. It's only that initial period, right? And trading card games are complicated. Like, even Final Fantasy, like, if you just the stack alone can be so confusing, and the wording on certain cards, and that actually choosing is different than selecting, even though in your brain you think, well, it's kind of the same thing, right? I'm picking something. So there's already so much complication to these games, and keywords, again, in the long run, make it so much easier. I've been wanting a keyword like Protect or Shell forever for cards like Minwu that just say, hey, don't receive damage less than their power. Instead of having to write that out, instead of on the Avalanche Legend Barrett, if Barrett is dealt damage less than his power, reduce it to 0 instead, or it becomes 0 instead. Just say he has Shell. Barrett has Shell, and so anytime you see the keyword Shell, okay, it has to take damage to its power or exceeding it. Otherwise, it dies. And you save so much space, you don't have to write that out on every card. Or put Protect on something like Rydia. Instead of Rydia does not receive damage from summons or abilities that your opponent controls, she has Protect. Oh, okay. I know Rydia has Protect. It won't suffer from this. So it would, just the space it would save on so many of these words. I came up with a word, actually, I'll show a little later, called Unity. And the point of the word being that essentially this text is only here if every card on your board exclusively has this element. It was meant for mono elements, right? So if all your cards are fire, okay, Unity kicks in. Now this card has text. As far as like some new ones, again, I would put those in. I would love to see Earth get something like Trample. I've kind of been asking for that for a while. If you don't know, Trample in Magic essentially says, if you have a 4/4 and I have a 5/5 and they clash, normally I would have the 5, I have 1 extra damage I didn't use because he's 4 on you. That 1 goes directly to you. I'd like to see something like that in Earth, If a 10k is blocked by a 5k, it still goes through for a point of damage because there's a big enough discrepancy. However you would want to word it. In Final Fantasy, it would be nice to see Lightning have something like Shock too, right? Or Paralyze. Paralyze is a pretty common status effect in the games, and that's where I would look too. Look for the games for these status effects. What about Mini? What about Berserk? What about if a forward has Mini, or you cast Mini on a forward, it can't block, or it can't attack, or whatever. Or if a forward's Berserk, instead of writing, Umaro must attack once per turn if possible, or just say Amaro has Berserk. That would already make so much sense thematically, and just, oh yeah, he's forced to attack if he's able to. So it's such a text saver on these cards. So huge fan of keywords. Give me drown me in the keywords, baby. No, of course you don't want like so many that it's insane, but for text saving, all aboard the keyword train. Woo woo. The Custom Card Man asks, do you think that flip cards could exist, aka cards that have 2 sides? Could they exist? Yeah, sure, why not? For those of you who don't know, let me flip on to this really quick. You should be able to see the screen. So here is a card from Magic called the Hound Tamer, and it's a double-sided card. They have this whole like day-night function. You have these werewolves that by day they're humans, and then by night they're turned to werewolves. So the front of the card is the Hound Tamer side here on the left, and then if it becomes nighttime in the game, it flips over onto the other side and has this untamed pup side. And I think they're really cool. Like, my girlfriend really loves the werewolves, and yeah, I like these cards. Like, could you put them in Final Fantasy? Sure. I don't know how you'd implement them. Of course, you'd have to come up with that. You could. Now, I will say it's a bit of a pain to, when you're playing the game, you have to unsleeve them and then like turn them over. Sometimes people won't put them back in the sleeves because it's easier to just leave them unsleeved. But I mean, that would be kind of neat. Maybe that's how you do some of the leveling up or experience I've wanted in this game for a while. That, oh, your level 1 Barts has now become level 3 Barts. You know, Alex Hancock and I talked about that in our last chat, and he gets powered up. So yeah, I mean, you could 100% put these in there. The only like downside is that you essentially have to have sleeves. Then sleeves must be required because otherwise you would see, oh, there's an untamed pup sitting on top of my deck because I can see the back of it. But I mean, I've never seen a tournament without sleeves anyway, so I don't really consider that to be a huge issue. And last but certainly not least, Adam C says, create your own card. What would it be? Which game would you have them remake if it were up to you? Mine would be Final Fantasy IV, for example. Hey, Adam, I'm glad you asked. So first I'm going to mention your game. So I don't like the 7 remake, so if they were to remake a game following those guidelines, just don't do it, please. Please just leave it alone. Leave your golden stuff alone. Don't destroy it. I really don't like the remake. However, let's say they were to remake it in an actual great way. I mean, 9 and 8 are up there, of course. I agree 4 would be a great choice, as is 5. So here's what I would actually pick. But let's say, no, they're going to do this 7 remake stuff. Like, they're going to do it like that. Do not take one of the great games and butcher it the way they did with the remake. You know, 7, 6, of course, being another great example. I'd love to see an updated 6. You know what I would pick? Final Fantasy 13. Because for me, 13 is like definitely on the lower parts of my list of Final Fantasies. I've only ever played it one time. I have the Platinum, so I put plenty of hours into it. But I've only gone through that story one time, and I've never really felt compelled to go back. And there is some good stuff in 13. There's a cool battle system. Like, I don't really care for the story. I find most of the characters to be either okay to Like, there's no one that I was like, wow, I love this character from this game. But it's got some fans, but it's a heavily criticized game. People called it way too linear when it came out. Like, it's, you know, maybe some people love it, but it's by no means one of the more popular Final Fantasies. So take that, and if you're going to remake it, okay, let's see what you can do with that. Maybe they expand it. Maybe most of the game is like Grand Pulse, you know, and most of the game feels open and alive and not, you have to wait 40 hours in before you get to an open, expanded area. So I think 13 would be a great choice for that. As for creating cards, funny you should mention that because I have made a few cards. Okay, so I made an entire set of backups to replace the anthems from Opus 1. And this was just something I was messing around with, which I thought it would be fun. But so this is what I would want to see, because I want to see an incentive and a reason to play mono colors. That no, you just play fire, you just play ice. Yes, there's a few like wind and water that already have that, but so those backups are 3 costs and they just do a power bump. And essentially all these ones would be, they'd have the power bump, but they're 2 costs, they're 1 cheaper. And they'd have this keyword that I made up earlier, like I said, called Unity, which says this only has this following text if your entire field is exclusively fire. So no multi-elements, no, you know, whatever else. And you could maybe make an exception for light or dark, because light or dark is supposed to go anywhere. So with that one exception, your whole field's got to be fire. But then instead of just giving the 1k bump, which you do, I wanted them all to have a field effect that like fit into the nature of that element. So for example, if Lebro's down, summons and abilities you own deal an additional 1000 damage. It cannot be reduced. And the point too is for all these to just be field effects, not like create stacks that you could respond to. So yeah, so any summon or ability you do now does 1000 more. So if you cast Brynhildr, all your Brynhildrs do 6000 damage, and it cannot be touched or messed with in any way. But you have to exclusively be playing fire for that. Here's some of the art so here's the art I used for the Lulu one, right? Same thing. 1000 power, every character you control, all of its dull abilities can be used immediately, as if it's got haste. But again, got to have unity. Maria, Forge Forming Party, 2,000 power. Here's Waka. Yours for Forge's opponent control lose during your attack phase, so water always kind of has superior attacking for it. Some of the other ones. And a Crow. You know, the wording on this one's kind of weird, but again, it kind of fit in the whole trample thing. So, Duke Larg. What I thought would be cool for this one, so essentially if an effect you own would dull an opponent's character, freeze it as well. If an effect you would freeze an opponent's character. So essentially, if you put a card that just says, hey, freeze 2 characters, now it dulls and freezes it automatically as long as you're playing exclusively ice. Or, hey, if you have something that normally would just dull something instead, now it will freeze it as well as long as you're playing ice exclusively. So I would love to just see a revamp of these anthems. They don't even have to be the same characters. I just did this for consistency, but just, you know, give me a really good payoff for mono that, hey, and I like the idea of this, that any card I play in mono is going to benefit from this. So that would be my idea. All right, those were all the questions we had for today. Thank you, everyone, for submitting them. If you want to submit your own, link in the description below for my Discord, or you can message me on Twitter, whatever you find convenient. Put the little Q&A tag, leave it in the comments of this video, just so I know that it's there. Thanks to everyone again who participated in the spoiler contest. Hope you enjoy Opus 20. Set reviews will hopefully be coming out sometime in the near future. I just got to figure out, what Jared's schedule is and, coordinate with him. But it'd be awesome if they came out as early as this week. Could be next week. Who knows? We'll just see how that goes. But anyway, I appreciate you watching. Appreciate your questions. And until next time, take care.